Is India's democracy under threat? It's a question that's been asked with increasing frequency in recent years. As we embark on this exploration, let's first lay down the pressing concerns that have been raised about the democratic trajectory of the world's largest democracy. First, we have a downgraded democracy. Reports from Freedom House indicate that India has slipped from being a free democracy to a partially free democracy. This downgrade is a significant concern, questioning the robustness of the democratic fabric of this South Asian giant. The second concern comes from the V-Dem Institute, which categorizes India as an electoral autocracy. This term suggests that while elections are still held, the overall democratic environment might be compromised. Third, we see an erosion of civil liberties. Under Prime Minister Modi's leadership, there's been increased pressure on human rights groups, intimidation of journalists, and attacks against minorities. These actions have led to a marked deterioration of political and civil liberties. Fourth, we have the fear of authoritarian policies. Modi's historic majority in parliament could potentially pave the way for far-reaching changes to India's constitutional order. Critics worry that these changes might affirm Hinduism as a de facto state religion, undermining the secular nature of the Indian constitution. Lastly, there are concerns about dictatorial tendencies. Critics argue that India might be moving towards dictatorship, citing instances like calling a special session of parliament without consultation during critical times. These 5 concerns form the backbone of the ongoing debate about the health of Indian democracy. Each point, each concern, is a piece of a larger puzzle, a puzzle that we'll attempt to piece together in the following scenes. As we delve deeper into these concerns, it's essential to remember that these are not just academic debates, but impact the lives of over 1 billion people. Once considered a beacon of democratic stability in Asia, India's status has been downgraded to a partially free democracy. The reasons behind this reclassification are numerous and complex. Freedom House, a US-based nonprofit, non-governmental organization that conducts research and advocacy on democracy, political freedom, and human rights, has recently altered India's status. This change reflects a growing concern about the erosion of democratic norms and practices in the country. The shift is attributed to a range of issues. These include a crackdown on expressions of dissent, a rise in communal violence, and attempts to undermine the independence of the judiciary. The situation has been exacerbated by the implementation of laws and policies that disproportionately impact religious and ethnic minorities. The implications of this downgrade are significant. For one, it sends a worrying message to other nations in the region and around the world about the state of democracy in India. Moreover, it could potentially affect India's international standing and influence, particularly in its relations with Western democracies that value the principles of freedom and human rights. The response to this downgrade has been mixed. The Indian government has rejected Freedom House's assessment, asserting that their democratic institutions remain robust and resilient. They argue that the report is biased and does not accurately reflect the realities on the ground. However, many Indian citizens and advocacy groups have expressed alarm at the downgrade. They argue that it is a wake-up call for the nation to introspect and address the issues that are threatening its democratic fabric. There is a growing call for the government to engage in dialogue and take steps to restore confidence in India's democratic credentials. Yet, the debate rages on. Some see the downgrade as an unfair assessment, while others believe it is a clear reflection of the current state of affairs. The discourse around India's democratic health is far from over, and the path forward remains fraught with challenges. The downgrade has not been without controversy, with many in India and abroad questioning the methodology and motivations behind the classification. The term electoral autocracy seems like a contradiction, but that's how the V-Dem Institute categorizes India. Electoral autocracy sounds paradoxical, right? An autocracy is a system where power is held by one person, whereas elections suggest a democratic process where power is decided by the people. So, how do these two seemingly contradictory terms come together in the context of India? Here's the thing. Electoral autocracy is a form of government that combines elements of both democracy and autocracy. It's like a chameleon, changing its colors to suit the situation. On the surface, it appears democratic, with regular elections and multiple political parties. However, beneath this democratic facade, the playing field is skewed in favor of the ruling party. This distortion can take many forms, from media bias and legal harassment of opposition parties to more subtle tactics like manipulating electoral rules. So why does the V-Dem Institute categorize India as an electoral autocracy? Well, it's due to a number of factors. They cite concerns over the centralization of power in the executive branch, the politicization of independent institutions, and the shrinking space for dissent. Additionally, there are worries about the fairness of elections, given allegations of voter suppression and manipulation of the electoral process. This categorization is more than just an academic exercise. It has real-world implications for India's image on the global stage. As a country that has long prided itself on being the world's largest democracy, being labeled an electoral autocracy is a significant blow. It raises questions about India's commitment to democratic values and principles, and could potentially impact its relationships with other democracies. While the government rejects this label, it nonetheless underscores the challenges India faces in maintaining its democratic character. The debate around India's democratic health is far from over. But one thing is clear: the label of electoral autocracy, whether accurate or not, is a stark reminder of the complex and changing nature of democracy in the 21st century. One of the hallmarks of a democracy is the protection of civil liberties, but in India, these appear to be eroding. The robustness of civil liberties is often used as a gauge to measure the health of a democracy. These liberties, which encompass freedom of speech, association, and assembly, among others, are the bedrock upon which democratic societies are built. However, recent reports suggest that these liberties are under threat in India. Human rights groups, the watchdogs of democracy, are reportedly facing increased pressure. Amnesty International, for instance, had to halt its operations in India in September 2020, citing relentless harassment by the government. Chillingly, this is not an isolated case. Several other organizations have reported similar experiences, painting a worrying picture of the state of civil liberties in India. Furthermore, the media, often referred to as the Fourth Estate, is experiencing its share of intimidation. Journalists, who are supposed to hold the powerful accountable, are facing threats and violence. The Press Freedom Index ranked India 142nd out of 180 countries in 2020. This highlights the shrinking space for free press and the growing danger journalists face in their line of duty. Lastly, and perhaps most distressingly, are the reported attacks against minorities. Religious, ethnic, and caste minorities have reported an alarming increase in violence. The social fabric of India, renowned for its diversity, seems to be fraying at the edges. These instances pose serious implications for India's democracy. The erosion of civil liberties not only undermines the democratic process, but also creates an environment of fear and intimidation. This, in turn, stifles dissent, curtails freedom, and hinders the development of a vibrant, inclusive society. The erosion of civil liberties is a troubling trend that threatens to undermine the democratic fabric of India. It's a call to action for all who believe in the principles of democracy, to stand up, speak out, and safeguard these essential freedoms. The fear of authoritarian policies and dictatorial tendencies is not uncommon in democracies, but in India, such concerns have taken on a new urgency. Prime Minister Modi's historic majority in parliament has sparked worries about potential far-reaching changes to India's constitutional order. With such a significant majority, the government has the ability to enact laws and amendments which could fundamentally alter the country's democratic fabric. For instance, there's a growing apprehension that this majority could affirm Hinduism as a de facto state religion. This is a significant concern in a country that prides itself on its secular constitution and diverse religious demographics. If such a change were to occur, it could potentially marginalize non-Hindu communities and exacerbate religious tensions. But the concerns don't stop there. Critics have pointed to certain actions by the government as signs of a shift towards dictatorship. Calling a special session of parliament without consultation during critical times, for example, has raised eyebrows. It's seen as an attempt to bypass democratic checks and balances and to consolidate power in the hands of a few. This move, among others, has led to accusations of an erosion of democracy and a movement towards autocracy. These are serious allegations, and they have sparked intense debates about the health of India's democracy. What's at stake here is not just the political climate of India, but also the fundamental rights and freedoms of its citizens. Democracy is, after all, about the people. If the government's actions are leading to a reduction in civil liberties, then it's clear that the democratic principles that India was built on are under threat. These concerns underscore the precarious balance between strong leadership and democratic principles in India's political landscape. As we continue to observe the unfolding political events in India, it's important to remember that the strength of a democracy lies in its ability to accommodate differing viewpoints and to uphold the rights and freedoms of all its citizens.